what is your source of faith?
I guess I'd like to say I don't have faith. I have a very sure sense of reality, and that finally covers everything. I mean, that's very clear to me.
Isn't
Right.
that basically the definition of faith, though?
Well,
Depends on who you ask.
Faith, I'm not talking about, you know, Bible thumping Baptists that are like, oh, I have faith in God, when it's their way of masking doubts. No, I mean, real faith is simply that sense of awareness that there's a truth with a capital T at the heart of the cosmos.
And trusting it in your life. Not to be so much afraid of what lies around the corner or anything, because, you know, things work the way they're supposed to, even if it means you get run over by a truck.
That trusting the element in life does strike me as more of a definition of faith.
Yeah. Well, you know, have you seen the bumper sticker, faith is a verb?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Well, it's a nice expression.
I was going more for the fact that there's a clear reality that I have experienced. And I differentiate that from some things that I choose to believe in because they're reasonable or...
Yeah, well, that's the gap between belief and faith, or between belief and knowledge.
Yeah, faith, as you once described it, is a matter of keeping the channels open.
Yeah. But the thing about there being an all-encompassing reality, I would say that is the origin of my experience of faith, even as a child.
Makes sense.
That there was always more, things were bigger than they seem, and that's before I even knew the word in any way.
At any rate, I mean, the meaning of faith goes back to a Proto-Indo-European root meaning, to trust or confide. And if you're trusting or confiding in someone, that's essentially keeping the channels open between you and another person. And faith is just a way of saying that you're keeping the channels open between you and the divine at the heart of reality.
Keeping the channel is keeping the faith.
Yeah.
Yes, I still like that. Keeping the channel open, as we say here.
Well, and there's the possibility for a sense of wonder if you really realize that you don't know what's coming next, that, you know, your desires can't define the unfolding of events, of experience. They can affect it a little bit, but that's different. They just affect your perception of it.
Saida Zainab?
I'm thinking about this question, and I don't really have anything more to say, but I guess faith is the definition of it and what it means is very personal to each individual. And that can also come from how they have experienced faith in their life. So it's very difficult to answer this question in a general way. But yeah, all I can say is it's a very personal experience of what faith means to that person and where it comes from and what the source is. For me, I grew up in a Hindu environment and we didn't use the word faith. We used a Sanskrit word for devotion at home. And so because I was exposed to that from a very young age, I still attach a devotional aspect to what faith is to me.
Well, I think faith is going to always have a devotional aspect, or it seems like it ought to always have.
But Larry, I like what you said about keeping the channels open, and that really is faith as a verb.
Yeah, if you're maintaining the channel, it's in action.
I would just add two things. One is that if I had to say a source of my faith, it would be the fire with the capital F that's at the heart of all things. It's the unity within multiplicity and the multiplicity within unity. But to get to a more mundane level, I would simply say, why is it that we always talk about having faith, keeping faith, not being faith?
Yeah.
And so my example would be the trees. They don't have, they don't keep, they just are. They put their roots into the ground and they reach up to the heavens. That is an example of pure being, and I think we should be more tree-like.
Well, we should. It's about being, not doing.
Right. Or as Eric Fromm wrote, was it being, not having, Anyway, so question 2, have you ever experienced periods of doubt? Or I can put this another way based on question 1. Have your signals ever been full of static? If so, how did you overcome them?
Well, the signal to noise ratio has been pretty high sometimes, just because there's so many voices. But I don't know that has ever hindered or interfered with my sense of the transcendent, which is more of an experience than a matter of belief.
Yeah, and noise is, in fact, just noise, and typically the noise will stop if you give it a little time. But I guess I've always seen doubts as something that happens in the process of knowledge. It's just all part of the process, if you will.
Say a little more about that.
Well, if I have doubts, that means there's something I don't know. And then it becomes more about knowledge than about being concerned about my doubt.
There are many famous writings, the Confessions of Tolstoy, the Confessions of Saint Augustine, many other writers from all traditions about how they proved to themselves that there was a God, or how they overcame or overcame doubt through faith, and that they rationally proved things to themselves. And very often these things are not about experience, it's about proof or overcoming doubt. And one thing Lawrence said, he said, that's wrong, because that's a force of the will and it's mental conceit. You can't think your way to God. You have to feel your way to God. You have to experience the divine, and you're never going to experience the divine by thinking it out in a mental way.
Right. Unless the thinking drives you so crazy, it stops. Get overload and everything gets quiet.
Saida Zainab, I'm curious about your answer, because I'm wondering if in your case you overcame them by changing the station.
Well, one could say that, not a thing to run away from. And in my case, it led to, changing of paths from Hinduism to Islam. And a doubt can occur in many different forms. It could be a doctrinal doubt, or it could be a method doubt. In my case, it was more related to the method, because that sort of understanding that I had at that time wasn't the same that I have now. So when I looked at, you made a very good point that about, for the previous question, that faith is not something to have, it's to be. But how can you be when you don't do the practices or the spiritual work that is needed to become? So I think for me, that doubt was more on the lines of doing at that time over being. And now that equation has reversed. So it's more about being than doing.
Yes, makes sense to me.
All right. Islam came into being almost 400 years ago because Muhammad felt that the religions of his day were debased. Since that time, we have arguably had a number of prophets, but no major religions. Today, the world is more in need of religion than ever, yet religion is more debased than ever. Is it perhaps time for a new religion to come?
I was going to say, I would just like to make a correction, if I may, in the question. It wasn't that the religion, it wasn't that Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, he came with this religion because he thought the religions were debased. In fact, it was the opposite. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Christianity or Judaism or even paganism to that extent. It was the practices of the people of the time that he didn't believe in. So it's, you know, the narrative of the question changes a lot when you look at it from that point of view.
Yeah, and the way the question puts it, is, in my mind, sort of put Muhammad in the same place as Joseph Smith.
Well, I specifically from a historical.
That's how he said he got his revelation.
I mean, I purposefully framed it from the historical critical perspective, and I knew that that would get a couple of comments, but sometimes I just like to get people's goats. I mean, the point is, you know, personally, and I don't really want to get into this because that's not necessarily the point of the question, but personally, I believe Muhammad was a prophet, Jesus was a prophet, Pythagoras was a prophet, and there have been a bunch of other prophets before and since. So do I have faith that Muhammad is the last ever prophet of God ever? No. I think that is probably something that was very useful for that time and place, but I think we need constant renewal of faith. And I think we're getting what I want with this question if we ask, you know, have we become too stagnant? You know, do we need a new religion? Do we need a renewal of the religions we have now? What do we need? Because right now, we have more people than ever in the world. We have more need of true religion than ever. Yet the churches and religions are very, very debased. And you're not seeing many saints forming. So for instance, when the world had a population that was much smaller, you actually were seeing lots of saints. And now what? You have a handful of saints in the last century and maybe none so far in the current century. Not that I know of, but I'm sure there could be some. But the point is that we need a renewal. And what are your views on that?
We need a renewal all the time.
Yeah, and in a way, every moment is a renewal, right?
And if you see the religion as static, or rather, if you see your spiritual path as static, that's kind of lifeless.
Yeah, and if another religion was to come about right now with another revelation that, you know, awakens the hearts of those who are dead, what's going to happen in 10 years to 100 years from now? The same question will arise. So I don't think it's a question.
As it has throughout all of history.
Right. So I don't think it's the duty of religion to, you know, to unblock that stagnation. If anything, it is the individual's responsibility to do the work so they don't feel stagnated.
That's true. The individual needs to do that work, but religions historically have provided a framework that's helped to motivate people or inspire them to do the work, just like a great piece of music has inspired someone. And I feel like right now, the religions today have become very stale and aren't performing their function as well as they could. And maybe we need something new, because certainly scientific materialistic atheism isn't going to help us out. And yeah, I mean, I have nothing against a renewal from within Christianity or Islam, but
it would have to be pretty dramatic at this point.
Exactly, because there's a lot of inertia. There's, you know, respectively 1,400 years and 2,000 years of inertia.
It's not only a matter of inertia, it's the matter of the fact that the world actually has changed. And a lot of the references and symbols that are used as part of the practice are so remote and often meaningless. So yes, there needs to be a renewal from outside or inside.
Yeah, and mostly from inside. I would never say that, that Muhammad has to be the last prophet, because that limits God. But I understand the doctrine, and fine with me.
And there are different ways renewals can happen, but people are also very stuck in their ways, and sometimes they need to be nudged out of them. For instance, in terms of Bibles, my favorite translation is from James Moffat. He did a very wonderful, little-known translation that has a lot of really unorthodox, wild, but amazing interpretations of certain passages. It was the favorite translation of Lawrence, Martin Luther King, and C.S. Lewis, but yet hardly anybody knows about it, and it's, I think, out of print now. And people are still even people with that are basically functionally illiterate are reading the King James version, which is ridiculous because the symbols and language in there won't mean anything for them. And if you look to the symbols that are being used in the Quran and the Bible from the time and place they were, people need to have an understanding of that. Symbols need to be alive. Symbols are like flowers. They need to be watered. They needed to be tended to. They need to be kept alive. And the problem is you can't just keep a symbol and say, okay, the dragon meant something back then, so it's going to mean the same thing today. If you let it alone and let it stagnate, it's going to either mean nothing or potentially mean the opposite of what it meant. And so what we need, and I think Sheikh Abu Bakr knew this, is we really need a science of living symbols.
That would be nice.
Tell us more about that. That would imply, or does that mean some symbols are in fact universal?
Well, they're universal for a time and place.
Okay.
Something that might lead an Englishman to God might not lead a woman from the Democratic Republic of Congo to God. It's the same way that a certain hand gesture might be considered very respectful in one society and very rude in another. Symbols are not absolutes. They're supposed to lead up to archetypes, and they're onwards. The problem is now everything is taken very literally, where we've become empiricists and rationalists, and we don't tend to think about things imaginatively any longer, which is a huge problem.
Yes.
If there were a spiritual renewal within Christianity, most Christians would consider it heresy, and we'd be right back in the place Jesus found himself, with the Pharisees and Sadducees and all those folks. So, whatever it is would almost have to leave the majority of Christian believers behind.